Hello, this is Robert. It's very nice to finally meet you face to face. Welcome to my 1000 subscribers Q&A video. But I've also got a couple of announcements that I want to make. Briefly, the launch of my website, where you can finally buy my music if you want to, of course. And if you do buy any of my music, you will get some extra bonus content that you won't get if you just watch on YouTube. Secondly, the launch of my Patreon account, where you can sign up for small weekly contributions, giving you access to all of the downloads of my music. And also, if you want, the possibility of working with me, collaborating on some songs. Now, I don't want to bore you with all the details up front in the video, so if you are interested in either of those two announcements, just wait until the end of this video where I'll give you all of the details that you need. So let's get on with the questions. I've pre-ordered the questions so that we can have a nice kind of flow of themes, but for goodness sake, let's get on with it. Greg Moskopoulos asks, what program do you use for your music? Do you play a musical instrument? And Marox also asks, hello my friend. Hello Marox. Hope you are doing fine. I am very well, thanks. I just want to know, what plugins do you use? By the way, I love your folk music, especially Moondance. So this is quite a common question. What plugins do you use? What software do you use? And it's actually very bad timing to answer this question because I've just had a pretty big upgrade across the board. So for any music that I've released before this Q&A video, which is at the end of 2015, I would have used Sibelius 6 for my composing, Cubase 5 for my performance, and then my mixing, and then my mastering, and also the beloved Windows Movie Maker for all of the video editing. But from now on, I'll be using Sibelius 8 for all of my composing, Cubase 8 for all of my performance, mixing and mastering, and Sony Vegas Pro 13 for all of my video editing, including this video that you're watching right now. In terms of plugins, Marox, you're probably referring to what we call VSTs, Virtual Studio Technology, which just basically means the instruments that people tend to use. I use a lot of East-West Quantum Leap VSTs. I also use a lot of the packages from Eduardo Terralonte, Forest Kingdom 2, the medieval one, I can't remember its name, Ancient Winds, I think it's called, and a lot of stock standard ones that you tend to get with Cubase. If you're asking about plugins in terms of what I use for mixing and mastering, again, bad timing because I've suddenly had a change. I used to just use all of the stock standard plugins with Cubase 5, but I have recently purchased some new plugins for mixing, some Ozone plugins, as well as some Waves plugins, so I'll be giving those a go and seeing how I go, but hopefully that answers your question. Patrick P says, congrats on almost 1,000 subs. Thank you, Patrick P. I have a question. On average, how long does it take you to complete a track? And Death Harmony asks, do you spend most time composing / arranging or mixing, or 50-50? Thanks and congratulations. Well, thank you, Death Harmony. I'm a big fan of your channel. So on average, I would say from starting up with an idea to having the video ready to go, probably 7 or 8 hours on average, but averages aren't always the best measure of how long something takes, because sometimes they take a short amount of time, sometimes they take a long amount of time. So I think probably the quickest I would ever manage something, a quick little piano piece, would probably be 2.5–3 hours, and the longest something could take, some very long song with orchestra and choir, that could be up to 20–25 hours, I suppose, so somewhere in that kind of range. So Death Harmony, how long do I spend on each component? Well, probably 4 to 5 hours on the composing performance side, and then 2 to 3 hours on mixing and mastering and making the video and all of that kind of stuff. Death Harmony asks again, you upload quite often. How can you generate music so frequently? How much time do you spend on it? Well, I do upload. I try and do it once a week, but I can't manage that all the time, so I think I'm averaging about 40 uploads a year. A lot of the music I've uploaded is music that I wrote in my youth and I've kind of redone for upload, so that does make it a little bit easier to have a lot of content to upload quickly, but I am running out of earlier stuff, so I'm going to have to come up with more brand new original music. How much time do I spend on this a week? I try and spend 2 days a week on my YouTube channel. Normally I'll try and spend one day on the weekend writing something new or or working on something new or arranging something new. And then maybe Tuesday or Wednesday I'll work on finalizing it, mixing and mastering it, and getting the video ready to release it. So I try and spend 2 days a week on this YouTube channel. Death Harmony asks again, your compositions sound quite different, so you don't use any templates and mix every time from scratch? Correct, I don't often use templates, except in some cases. If I'm writing a string quartet piece, then I'll take an old string quartet piece and just use the settings for that again. And sometimes if I'm using a kind of power metal band setup with the basic drums and 2 guitars and bass guitar, solo guitar and a pad, sometimes I'll use a template from that, I suppose, or at least I'll take an old file and save it again. But most of the time I do like to start from scratch because I don't want to feel like I have to have a set number of instruments. So I'll bring in an instrument when I feel like I want it, or I'll trial different sounds and move it around. And so yeah, when it comes to mixing as well, I always start from scratch. I think it's probably better that way. I think you learn a bit quicker rather than using templates over and over again. Death Harmony asks again, you're pushing it a bit, Death Harmony. Some of your compositions sound harmonically complicated. Do you have some background, school or something? Well, sort of. I was a classically trained piano player when I was at school. I started off with group lessons. I actually have some of the books that I used to play while I was in group lessons to start off with. So I'll just kind of show you. It was lovely stuff, lovely pictures, and we play these various notes. It's just a simple scale, isn't it? Let me see what else I've got here. But yeah, some really nice books there. These are the actual books that I used to play 25 years ago or whenever it was. So really lovely things. So I started off learning in what we call group lessons at a music school, a kind of after school thing that my mum would take me to. And in these group lessons, I had a lot of fun. We didn't just play piano, we sang, we danced, we used percussion, we sort of did little bits and bobs, and we learnt music quite slowly, but it was a lot of fun. And I highly recommend it if any of you are having children soon or thinking of getting your children involved with music. It was a very nice pathway for me to start off with something that was just a lot of fun with these group lessons. But then after a few years, my teacher was saying that I was doing quite well and I should move on to doing the exams. So I started on what we call 3rd grade exams when I was in about 3rd grade at school. I did what's called the AMEB syllabus, which is an Australian version of a piano syllabus, quite similar to one of the famous English ones. I can't remember which one. So I did that pretty much all the way up until the end of high school, where I got up to grade 8, which is the level below the associate diploma, which is the first level where you get to write some letters after your name. So I got up to that level. So during that time, I obviously played a lot of classical music and learnt a lot of classical music. I also had to do a lot of theory at that time, and I actually also have some of my old theory books, which I found. So this is a grade 2 theory book. These Dulcie Holland books are fantastic. This would be my writing from when I was in primary school, writing down all of the different intervals and so forth. So I was sort of forced to do all of these. That's a quite funny answer there. I just went yes. So I was sort of forced to do these when I was at school. I enjoyed them a little bit. I didn't enjoy them immensely, but playing a piano was obviously much more fun. But it did give me a very good grounding into how all of the theory of music works. And I guess years later, when I started composing seriously, having all of that grounding work meant that I favoured classical music in some areas. So perhaps that's why you're picking up that some of my music sounds quite technical. Alright, Paul Caveworks asks, was it hard for you to start your music channel? Were you worried of people's reactions? I know I was. Well, no need to be worried, Paul. I've actually found that people have been very nice to me, on YouTube at least. And I've done a lot of music before with other projects and received criticism from all directions, so I do have a pretty thick skin by now. So I didn't really have any problems starting up. I wish I'd started up a long time ago. I didn't sort of know that this is something that people would do. They would release their compositions on YouTube. I already have been composing for a very long time. And it was when I happily stumbled across Peter Crowley, who I'm sure you all know, and I saw, wow, he's uploading his music to YouTube. I should do that too. And that was about 2 years ago that I started. So no, I was quite excited by it. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed the journey so far. Asks, I have some questions about your approach to composition. Smiley face. Who are the composers that made you want to start composing? Well, that's a bit tricky, because identifying when I wanted to start composing is controversial, I suppose. I do actually have with me, I've done my research for today, I do have my very first composition, and it's in this book here. This is quite funny. It's called, you probably can't read that. There we go. It's called Thundering Clouds in C minor. Lovely title. And it's dated September 1996, which is probably before a lot of you were born, but I was 11 years old at that. No, 10 years old. I was turning 11 very soon. So that's my very first composition at age 10. Not that good. It'd be funny. Maybe I should make a recording of it someday. Well, if you ask me to, maybe I will. I do remember when I was at that age that I did like the idea of being a composer. I kind of saw classical composers as superheroes in a way. I think I'd seen Amadeus, the film, and I had seen a Beethoven film, not the dog Beethoven, but a film about Beethoven, the composer. And I remember I loved watching them composing so quickly on pen and paper that it got really messy and you could hardly read it, but they knew what it was all about. And part of me thought, oh, I'd love to be that brilliant composer. But then you sort of realise that you're born 300 years too late. But I had a go at it when I was 11, so it sort of got me started in that sense. I did a little bit more at school, but probably the trigger point that made me think, oh, I think I would like to do this, at least semi-professionally, was being introduced to Final Fantasy VIII by my friend Ken. I wasn't really into computer games when I was in high school, but I'd showed Ken a game that we'd hired from the library. Back in those days, used to hire games from the library or the video store. So I was showing Ken this game, and he said, "Oh, Rob, that's a terrible game. Let me bring over a Final Fantasy game." And I said, "Oh, Ken, no, I don't want to bother you." And he said, "Look, I'll play you the opening scene, and then you can tell me to take it back if you want, but just let me play the opening scene." So he brought in Final Fantasy VIII, and I watched it, and it changed my life. The music in particular was so incredible that I thought, whoa, this is an illustration of how music can be used in such a powerful way. And from that moment, I've been very interested in computer game music, as some of you will know from what I've been uploading to my channel. So it was certainly a moment that turned me on to composition in a big way, and I think I'd have to identify that as the life-changing moment. Death Harmony, how did you get back in again? My honest question is how you've got 1,000 subscribers in about 2 years. I mean, your music certainly deserves more than that, but still, I've never seen you promoting yourself on those epic music channels, etc. So do you have some channel strategy? Not really. I don't know how I feel about those epic music channels. I've got no problem with other people wanting to use them, but there's something about them that doesn't quite sit right with me. I think if another channel, such as these promotional channels, asked me to submit my music, then I would be okay with that. But having to submit it proactively doesn't quite sit correctly with me. So I've never really thought of that as an avenue for promoting myself. I've not done anything special, except I suppose I did get in touch with Adrian von Ziegler and offered to write some sheet music for his music in exchange for him giving me a shout out when he released them, and he was very happy to accept. So I got a few of his listeners that way. If you're one of them, thank you so much. It's very nice to have you with me. But I've not done anything special. I think just being nice to people is the most important thing. And I don't mind how many subscribers I have or how many listeners I have. I think what I really just want are for those people who like my music to listen to it, and for those who don't like it to not listen to it, if that kind of makes sense. You know, however big my audience is however big it is, and as long as they can find me, then that's all that's important to me. Asks, what are your influences about music composition? Well, this is my least favourite question, and I'm not criticising you. This is a question that I've had before when I've been interviewed in other areas of music, and it's a question I hate seeing in interviews. You know, what are your influences? Because it's so confusing, isn't it? You know, sometimes that means who are your favourite bands. Sometimes it means which kind of bands you're trying to copy. Sometimes it means where do you get the stories for your music. Inspiration is such a psychoanalytic thing. I don't think it's anything that a composer could really identify about themselves. So I don't know. In that sense of the word, inspiration, the way I think of it, I think it's just too hard to explain how you can be inspired to do music. Clearly I am inspired by a range of factors, but I don't think I can really explain how that works. I do think, though, that you can't manufacture inspiration. So I think if you're not inspired to do something, you shouldn't do it. But if you do feel like you want to do something, you should do it. And I think it's just really that simple. I just feel like I want to make music. And I'm lucky enough that I'm in a position to make music, so I make music, and it's as simple as that. Okay, again asks, do you compose directly on the instrument or on the sheet paper or notation software? 50-50, I suppose. I do have a keyboard that I play sometimes to come up with ideas. But half the time as well, I'm just clicking the notes into Sibelius, which is the notation software, and sort of thinking through it that way. It is important to me that when I'm clicking on the notes, that I hear as close as possible to the finished sound, so that I can kind of listen to the overall soup of the sounds, and it can sort of kind of drive me. But sometimes I do just play on the piano for a bit and hit the record button and just come up with some ideas. So I don't choose one way or the other. Again, do you tend to be a conscious writer or an improviser? And Queen Meow Tigress also asks, thinking and too shy to ask a question. Oh, you do ask a question. Meow, I know. When you make music, does your mind picture it like a fight part, picturing characters fighting, and with love music you picture lovers? Or does your mind make up stories as you make this epic and lovely music? So thank you, Miss Tigress, and to a little bit of both, I think. I improvise a little bit when I'm just playing around and just see what happens. Not in a jazzy way, but I'm happy to just sort of play around and see what happens. But sometimes it's useful to fall back on some of the rules of music to give you a solid base. So I don't know, I think I'm kind of always using the two together. In terms of your question, Miss Tigress, I don't necessarily have a picture in my mind of exactly what's happening, or even necessarily a story. Often some of the stories that I dream up come after the music. The music just sort of happened, and I think, oh, this sort of feels a bit like this, or it feels a bit like this. But sometimes I do, I guess, too. Sometimes I find a nice image that I want to use and I can write something very specifically for it. But most of the time, I guess, I just sit down and write something and just see what happens and hope that I like it. The Smile BC asks, what genre is your favourite to make and why? Also, which has the most personal value to you? Jeez. Very hard to say, because I don't make anything that I don't like. I like everything that I make. That's my most favourite to make. Perhaps the music I have that has a lot of drums and guitar. I don't know, it's just a fairly recent thing for me to enjoy a kind of power metal experience, so it's fun to kind of play with thunder, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Which has the most personal value to me? Probably the songs that I work on, the collaborative songs. At the time of recording, I've already released 4 collaborative songs, those being The Darkness, 10,000 Ghosts, I'll Be Waiting, and Little Girl, Little Girl. And in all 4 of these cases, I've written these songs with a lyricist and then found a singer, put it all together. And there's something just very nice about coordinating a project like that and working together. And we all find it very enjoyable. So I think those mean quite a lot to me, those songs that I've done, and I want to do more of them. That's part of what I'm trying to set up on my Patreon account. Charm, God I love you, Charm. She asks, what is your least favourite type of music to work with, create, and why? Oh, Charm. Well, I wouldn't release anything on my channel that I don't like, or that I don't like working on. I guess the answer would have to be jazz music, which I've had to do before. I've had to play for some jazz bands and play in some jazz musicals and that kind of thing. And look, I'm fine with jazz, I can listen to jazz, but it just doesn't quite have that extra something special that other forms of music have. And I'm a classically trained piano player. I've never really had the proper exposure to jazz chords. I mean, I can do it, I can do a fairly good job at it, but I'm nowhere near at the level required to play jazz properly and to understand it properly. So I think that would have to be my least favourite genre of music to work in. Sorry if anyone else likes jazz. David Lonegro asks, do you plan to release an album of your music? That'd be epic, and congrats on your success, by the way. Well, thank you, David. Not really. I think I have the attitude that an album would need to be pre-written before I release it. So I know other composers like to take a collection of their work and wrap them together as an album. It doesn't really work for me. I think if I'm going to work on an album, I'm going to work on it ahead of time. So I know I'll have 12 pieces around this certain theme, and that'll be done, and that'll be finished before I start releasing anything. I don't have anything like that on the horizon now, but sometime in the future. I guess the one exception to that would be the Robert's Adventure soundtrack that I kind of released as an album. I released them one a day about a year ago. But I could well do things like that in the future. If your question is more, can we buy lots of your music together for slightly cheaper, then yes, I can set those things up on my website if you want me to. There's no problem there, but to me that doesn't really count as an album, it's just a little collection. Paul Caveworks, you're still here, Paul. He asks, do you see yourself working on a game, movie, etc.? By the way, you would totally rock that. Well, thank you, Paul. Perhaps surprisingly to you, I don't really see myself working on films or movies. That's not a great desire of mine. The 3 things I love to do with my music are working on musicals, musical theatre, video game music, and also just general songwriting. And I'm interested in symphonic metal, songwriting, kind of ballads, and even children's songs as well I'm interested in. Those are my 3 big passions. I have already produced a musical. I've never written for a game. Well, I've sort of written for one game, I guess, if you count the game that I wrote to hire myself as the composer. I've written a lot of songs. I have actually already written for 3 short films, so it's not as if I'm neglecting short film writing in the first place, but it's just not the number 1 priority. It's the number 4 priority, I suppose. You may be thinking, why? Don't you love film music? Yeah, I do like film music, but I think I like the other forms of music even better. I think I seem to prefer the genres where music takes more of a front seat rather than a back seat, which is often the case in movie music. I mean, let's face it, often music is just there in the background to kind of help with the emotion of whatever's happening on the screen. But when you have a kick-ass battle theme that's playing while you're fighting in a computer game, the music is the battle. It's wonderful. Or in a musical theatre piece where you've got this beautiful piece of music playing while these 2 lovers are singing to each other, and it's just about that moment. That to me is just the pinnacle of the expression of music. But look, I would still happily write for film or for movies, but it's not a burning desire of mine. Jeremy Gaines asks, my question is, at what point compositionally did music move from being a hobby to something more? when you heard the finished product and were surprised at how professional it sounded? Well, Jeremy, I don't think there is a moment where that happens. I think it's more of a, if it happens at all, it's more of a gradual evolution. A few things I could say on this. Even when I'm working on music now, I still always feel as though it's pretty good. I never feel as though it's perfect, so I'm always wanting to get a little bit better. However, with that said, whenever I do go back into my past and listen to something that I wrote that I haven't listened to for a long time and that I thought wasn't going to sound very good, I do surprise myself. I often go, actually, that was pretty good. Now that I've listened to it, that was pretty good. So that's interesting. But I've definitely had some stepping stone moments in my evolution as a musician, and some of you may have experienced this too if you play music. I remember the first time that something I had arranged for a string orchestra, my school string orchestra, was played at a rehearsal. So this is all it was. The night before, I did an arrangement of some well-known songs into a string orchestra arrangement, and I brought it to the rehearsal the next morning, and I asked my strings teacher, Mr. T is his name, can we play through this for 5 minutes at the end? And he said yes, and we played it. And that was a pretty good feeling, to think that something I'd written last night is now being played by live musicians. I'm almost controlling what they're doing. So that was nice. And it was an even nicer feeling when I was first able to hear someone perform something that I had written, and that happened with a string quartet that I was playing in. We performed one of my compositions at a wedding, so that was really lovely. I also distinctly remember the first time I heard other musicians perform one of my songs in front of an audience of which I was a member. That was special. I've also had the experience of a classroom of 10-year-olds singing with great joy a song that I had written for me, and that was very special as well. The first time that you put on a show with a musical, first time that you play on stage with the band, these are all pretty special moments to experience, and they kind of build up piece by piece. So I guess at each stage you kind of think, yeah, this is getting pretty cool, but you never feel like you've got there to the end, no matter what you do. Well, at least that's what I feel now. I might feel differently in the future. Thank you for your question. Xylo Piano asks, what is or are your favourite musical instruments to listen to or to compose with? Well, I only compose with one instrument, with the keyboard. I don't play guitar well enough to compose with it yet, although I play guitar well enough to compose for it, but not to compose with it, if that makes sense. Favourite instrument to listen to? I'm a real sucker for a good flute. I love a good flute. And let's say harpsichord too. Harpsichord concertos are just the best thing in the world, aren't they? Michael Rakansky asks, what are your favourite bands/artists? Well, I guess in terms of bands, my go-to music would have to be Sonata Arctica, Nightwish, both from Finland, and Rhapsody of Fire from Italy, especially in the last 5-6 years. If I need to do a lot of work, I need to just put some music on to get me through it, those will be the three bands that get me through. In terms of classical composers, I'm a Bach man. I love J.S. Bach. I love playing his music. Prolific writer, just so simple yet so wonderful. But of course, they're all good, aren't they? Although, to be fair, I do have a preference for Baroque music first and then classical music second. The Romantic era and the contemporary era, the 20th century music. I'm not talking about bands and movie scores, I'm talking about 20th century music that you might get taught at school. Those last two eras, not so much. I mean, they're nice, but the Baroque and classical, give me that any day. And even early Renaissance music too, I absolutely adore that. Any particular artists that I enjoy? I think basically just the songwriters of my favourite bands or the composers from my favourite eras. I think as individuals, those are the people who I most admire. Yeah. Okay, Matthew James asks, why do you have a ridiculously good-looking bassist in your band? Ridiculously good? Really? I suppose. If you look at him at night time, well, it's a good question, Matthew James. For those of you who don't know, I do have a band. We're called Awaken Solace. We're a symphonic metal band from Brisbane. This is a picture of our bass player. His name is Matthew Hang on a second. You both have the same name. What are the chances of that? Goodness me, wow. Coincidences, hey? Well, Dime Nomnomite asks, why is your sister so awesome? Well, that's an easy one, Dime Nomnomite. Anyone who shares the same DNA with me is awesome, obviously. But yeah, seriously, my sister Ali is awesome. She's a very good writer, and she wrote the lyrics for the first collaborative song, The Darkness, that I release. I have an awesome brother too. Love you, Mick. Paul K Works, how did you get in again? He asks, if I may, what is your profession, and how do your family, friends, colleagues see your music YouTube channel if they know of it, that is? Well, it is true, I do have a day job. This might come as a surprise. I am a lecturer of mathematics at a university here in Queensland. I did a mathematics degree when I left high school. And I've done a bit of teaching of maths in the United Kingdom at an internet school, and when I came back I was offered some tutorial work, and that turned into becoming a part-time lecturer. And I've lectured all of the different first year subjects at our university. So it's a lot of fun. I do love mathematics, and I love teaching as well. I never knew I was going to get into teaching when I was studying mathematics, but it's become a big part of my life. The other part of your question, how do your family, friends, colleagues see your YouTube channel? My family all know about it, but I don't push it down their throats. They can sort of watch it whenever they want to. Friends, I don't really talk about it that much actually. Normally there are other things going on. They often ask me about the band and how the band's going. And colleagues, again, it's just something that comes up if it comes up. As a lecturer, I'm not really supposed to advertise all of the different things I'm doing, but you know, if people ask me, then I'm happy to tell them whatever they might like to know. And finally, Carla Veronica asks, what hobbies do you have? Well, Carla, not that many actually. I love my music, I love my maths, I love my cricket. Now, you may not know what cricket is, but it's a sport that we play in Australia. It came from England, probably most popular in India. Similar to baseball, but much more interesting in my opinion. So I do watch far too much cricket and go to far too many games. And for those who know anything about cricket, I'm not so much of a T20 person. I love Test match cricket. Test cricket, its invention is quite possibly the greatest achievement by mankind. And those are all of the questions. Thank you everyone who asked a question. I hope my answers were interesting enough. If you want any follow-up information, just ask down below. So, about the two big announcements, about my website and my Patreon page. I've made two videos, one for the website, one for the Patreon page, which I'll put up now, here and here. You can click on them now to see all of the information you want about either of them. These videos are private for now, but I'll release them in the coming few days to make them public. I don't want to overload everyone with information. Thank you again so much. If you're one of my 1,000 subscribers, it means a lot to me. If you're not, and you just like watching, that also means a lot to me. It's been very nice chatting with you. Hopefully we can have more of these in the future. And thank you so much.